Hello all. In this video what we try to do is we'll have a look into why NCERTs are so important when it comes to preparing for UPSC civil services. You must have got a similar session for almost all the subjects, and what I do over here is we'll have a look into the importance of NCERTs for economics. So what I'm trying to have a look at is initially we'll have focus on how questions are framed based on NCERT, or put it differently, how well can your understanding or your quality of answering in the prelims and mains, or largely prelims, improve substantially as a result of your command of your NCERTs? So how important is your command of NCERT? We'll illustrate that through questions, the previous year questions that UPSC has asked. Towards the end, what I'll do is I'll show you the list of NCERTs that you should read, and I'll show you their index pages, and I'll show which all chapters are important for our examination perspective. So let's get started. So this is a 2023 prelims question. So it's a statement based question. It's like, so you have two statements. I'm not going into what the answer to this question is. Each question that we have a look into, we are not interested in identifying the answers to the question. We are interested in identifying how this question can be answered if your fundamentals from the NCERT is strong. That's what we are trying to do. The first statement is, in the post-pandemic recent past, many central banks worldwide had carried out interest rate hike. So this is something from current affairs that you should be knowing. Okay, fair enough. Let's assume you know that. Statement 2. Central banks generally assume that they have the ability to counteract the rising consumer prices via monetary policy means. So this is referring to the inflation targeting function of the Reserve Bank of India or any other central bank around the world. So whatever the answer to this question is, what happens is whenever after prelims, people go digging for sources of answers. So where does the answer to this question lie? The answer to this question lies in your NCERT. In your NCERT, Introductory Macroeconomics, Chapter 3, Money and Banking, it will have a section called as Bank Rate Policy, which is coming under this largest heading, which is the Reserve Bank or the Central Bank. Under there it speaks about the functions of the Reserve Bank of India or any central bank of the world. So it speaks about what impact does it has on the bank policy or bank rate policy, how it affects money supply, etc., etc. That is exactly what is being asked. So if you know your NCERTs well, if you know your NCERTs throughout, and you should be knowing it so well those related, you will be very easily able to answer those questions. So I'll show you another very simple, straightforward question straight out of NCERT. Which of the following activities of the Reserve Bank of India is considered to be part of sterilization? What is this sterilization that we are speaking about? Option A, conducting OMO, etc., etc. Here also, the same NCERT, the same section will have another heading which is called as sterilization by RBI. It clearly says what the idea of a sterilization is. See, one single prelims, two questions coming from the same NCERT, same chapter, same subheading. So that shows you how important NCERT is and how important this particular topic called as money and banking for your UPSC examination is. Next is a question on NIR and RIR, which is the exchange rates. With reference to the Indian economy, consider the following statements. An increase in the nominal effective exchange rates indicates appreciation of the rupee. An increase in the real effective exchange rate indicates an improvement in the trade competitiveness. Third statement is, an increasing trend in the domestic inflation related to the inflation in other countries is likely to cause an increasing divergence between NIR and RIR. So you need to know what NIR is, what RIR is, what implication does it has on the economy. Where do you get the answer to this? You need not look for any other sources. This is where your answer lies. Your NCERT, Introductory Macroeconomics, Chapter 6, Open Economy Macroeconomics. It will clearly examine or explain what NIR or what RIR is. See, sometimes when it comes to NCERT, the problem that you identify is their explanation may not be up to the mark. It might not be very explanatory in itself. So in those cases, what you do is you refer to other sources, maybe online sources like Investopedia and all are very good sources to refer to understand. They explain things so well. They will have a short video of things and all. But how any concept in the NCERT, if you don't understand, you need to go other sources. But everything in NCERT, all those things that I show towards the end you should know definitely before going for your prelims. Now, it's another question. Which of the following activities constitute the real sector in the economy? Farmers harvesting their crop, textile mills converting raw cotton into fabric, etc., etc., etc. Now, I'm not interested in understanding what all these components are. I'm interested in understanding where does the answer to this question lie. Again, your same NCERT, Introductory Macroeconomics, Chapter 2, National Income Accounting. So, if you understood the circular flow, the answer to this question comes from the circular flow. Now, next is a question about recession. UPSC has in the past 3-4 years has continuously asked questions on economic crises. It could be a financial crisis, it could be an economic crisis, it could be a recession, whatever it is. Which among the following steps is most likely to be taken at the time of an economic recession? So where do you get the answer to this question? All those questions that we viewed earlier, the answers were clearly visible in one chapter. But to answer this question, you need to be very well aware of your chapter 5, which is about the government budgeting, chapter 6, open economy, macroeconomics, and even part of your chapter 3. So many a times answering your questions based on NCERT, you will not be able to straight away find the answer in one topic. But if you connect everything together, you will be able to find the answers. And that is exactly what UPSC wants you to do. And that is how this subject is very different from other subjects. So your answers might not lie in one page, but it's all about connecting what you read in first chapter with the 6th chapter, with the 3rd chapter and the 4th chapter. So this is another question, which is basically the effect of devaluation. Where do you get your devaluation? Same NCERT, chapter 6, open economy, macroeconomics. It explains what revaluation is, what appreciation is, what devaluation is, what depreciation is. So next is a question of a money multiplier. It's one of the very frequent questions. So again this question, where do you get your answer? Chapter 3, same NCERT, chapter 3, money and banking. Now that's basically about the NCERT, the most popularly talked about NCERT called as Introductory Macroeconomics. It's not just this NCERT that's important for us. You have other NCERTs also. The next set of questions that are going to come are from your NCERT, which is called as Indian Economic Development. So the Indian economic development is structurally different from the earlier NCERT that I spoke about, because the introductory macroeconomics NCERT was largely conceptual, in the way it's written. It's very conceptual, everything is conceptual. On the other hand, this particular NCERT, it's largely like a storyline. It starts with the first chapter, Indian economy on the eve of independence. It will take you down the line across how Indian economy has evolved over a period of time and how Indian economy is today and why is it like this as it is today. That's how the trajectory goes. Then it will have chapters on poverty, development, etc., etc. See, all these chapters are very important because it will give you an idea about the history of Indian economy in the period after independence. So if you know history, you will know why a particular thing was put in place. If you read this NCERT, you will know why did we need something like Green Revolution? Why was something like MSP being introduced? What was the context of the 1991 reforms, the popularly called as LPG reforms? What is the context of? So you will be clearly able to trace the history, which means you know the logic behind a measure. Whenever you know the logic behind a measure, you will be able to predict the logic behind the future measures. For example, if we had something like Green Revolution in the mid-1960s, you will be able to appreciate why did we have something like the technology missions in the mid-1980s. So this prediction, or when you understand why MSP was introduced, you will be able to understand why something like PM Kisan was introduced. The logic can be traced. So if you know the flow of the economy, and in order to understand how well your economy is placed today, you need to understand how your economy has been throughout the period. So this is an NCERT with reference to Indian economy after 1991. Economic liberalization, consider the following statement. There's a statement about worker productivity, a statement about rural areas, etc., etc. So where do you get the answer to this? See, your NCERT, Indian Economic Development, will have a third chapter which basically speaks about the 1991 reforms. It will have a section 3.6, Indian economy during reforms and assessment. So this section will give you an idea about how your economy has performed in the post 1991 period, which is exactly what this question is trying to ask you. Now, there is another question. Which of the following factors or policies were affecting the price of rice in India in the recent past? This is a question from agriculture, or you can say this is a question from current affairs maybe. But the origin of all these things, the MSP, government trading, government stockpiling, consumer subsidies, it lies somewhere in our post-independence history. So if you read this NCERT, you will know why these things has originated. And then you will be able to understand which of this could potentially affect the price of rice. And this is another question on planning. See, people believe from an examination perspective, planning has become irrelevant since the Planning Commission has been abolished and Niti Aayog come into place. But you see questions on 5-year plans being asked even after Niti Aayog coming into the picture, even though with a relatively lower frequency. But where do you get the answers to your questions on planning? Your same NCERT, chapter 2, which is basically about your 5-year plans. This is again about land reforms. The same NCERT will speak about that. Now what I'll do is, I'll pick you the list of NCERTs which you should compulsorily read for your UPSC prelims as well as the mains for your UPSC perspective. So in economics, you largely have 4 NCERTs for the 11th standard and 12th standard, 4 NCERTs. The 9th standard economics NCERT and the 10th standard economics NCERT, those things do not have much things anyway. It's not necessary that you read that, because everything that's being explained in the 9th and the 10th NCERTs are there in the 11th and the 12th NCERTs. But the 9th standard NCERT and all is actually very beautiful read, where they speak about the Palampur case study and all. But all the NCERTs that you have an NCERT called as Introductory Macroeconomics. Okay. Then you have another NCERT which is Introductory Microeconomics. Then you have another NCERT, Indian Economic Development. Then you have another NCERT, Statistics for Economics. These are the 4 NCERTs that you have at the level of 11th standard and 12th standard. The 4th NCERT, you need not even have a look into. So it's basically statistics, for example, how something like a CPI or indexes, all these things are calculated. Those are not important for our examination perspective. Of the remaining 3, the second one, which is the Introductory Microeconomics NCERT, is also not worth the input. See, in order to understand economics, you need to know a bit of microeconomics, no doubt on that. But should you know this much microeconomics as is being put in this NCERT? No. A basic reading of microeconomics, a basic idea into the demand curve, the supply curve, the equilibrium mechanisms would do. This NCERT is so much when we consider the UPSC's demands. So I would recommend you not to read this thing, but if you're interested, you can anyway read. Then comes our most important NCERTs, Introductory Macroeconomics and Indian Economic Development. So this is the index page of our Introductory Macroeconomics NCERT. You have 6 chapters. First chapter, obviously important, introduction. Second chapter is National Income Accounting, again important. Third chapter, Money and Banking, again very important. This chapter, the 4th chapter, Income Determination, you need not read this chapter. Okay, this is not important for us. The fifth chapter is about the government, the budgeting things and all. And the sixth chapter is about the open economy, macroeconomics, external sector, BOP, this kind of things. So you need to read these 5 chapters in full, in thorough. Now another question is old NCERT or the new NCERT. See, now this has become a bit more complicated. You have old NCERT, you have new NCERT, you have latest NCERTs. Latest NCERTs are those NCERTs which are rationalized, the recently rationalized versions of that. Whatever be the logic behind rationalization, you have new NCERTs which have very little content, or the amount of content in the latest NCERTs is much less compared to the older NCERTs. So there are 2 ways of going about it. Either you can pick your old NCERT, you will get the PDFs of that, you read that in full and check for the latest NCERT if there are any new portions in this NCERT which is not present in the older NCERTs. If there is something, you read that also, that's it. But the possibilities of a new topic in the latest NCERT is quite low. That's one approach that you can follow. Start with old, substantiate it with the new. On the other hand, you can start with the latest NCERT which is available on the NCERT website, or the books which are available now. You can read that. The greatest benefit of this is these are more simplistic or reader friendly when compared to the older ones. So you read this thing, but when you read this, you are quite possibly going to miss a lot of things which were there in the older NCERTs. So what you do is, once you read the latest NCERTs, you pick a PDF of the old NCERT and check for those topics which you have missed out in the newer NCERTs, and those topics you fill it. So either you start with the old and fill with the newer one, or you start with the new one and fill it with the older one. Okay. So this is the first NCERT. The second NCERT is about Indian economic development. All chapters are important. Development policies, Indian economy on the eve of independence, Indian economy in the planning period, economic reforms, poverty, human capital, rural development, every chapter is important. Now, this is another NCERT. This is an NCERT that's not an economics NCERT. This is a geography NCERT. It may be titled Fundamentals of Human Geography, or it may be titled People, Environment and Development, depending upon the version that you are looking at, if it's an old or the new one. The newer ones are titled Fundamentals of Human Geography. So, ideally this is actually important. All chapters are important. Some chapters are important from an economics perspective. Some chapters are important from a geography perspective, because that's what the human geography that we are speaking about. So especially the chapters like world population, human development, or even the secondary sector, all these are very important. So this is something that an NCERT that's often missed by aspirants. Make sure you read this particular NCERT also, because this is one of the most well written NCERTs out there. So by that we come to the end of our discussion on NCERTs. Thank you.